Hi, how are you? My name is Richard Lee, and I'm a city council candidate for the District 19 that goes from all the neighborhoods, from College Point all the way to Douglaston. 안녕하세요. 제 이름은 리처드 이입니다. 저는 현재 뉴욕 시의원 후보, 여기 19구역, 컬리지 포인트 동네에서 리틀넥까지 그 모든 동네들의 구역입니다. My story is very similar to, I think, a lot of other Korean Americans who came to the United States. You know, my parents came to the States just around like the early 1980s, and I was born here, and then went to public school, studied, went to Bronx Science, and then when I was in high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. I think a lot of my other friends knew, oh, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I was really good with computers, and so I said, okay, I'm going to be a computer scientist. So I applied for college to go to Carnegie Mellon, where I studied computer science. But while doing that, I quickly realized that I hated it. I was good at it, but I knew I disliked it. And so in my third year of college at Carnegie Mellon, I switched my major. It was a really, really difficult decision because I switched it at the end of my third year in college to study what I really wanted to do and knew I wanted to do going forward as a career, which was public policy. And so I switched my major. In my senior year, I had to go to school during the summer, and then the fall, and then the next semester, and then the next summer, because I switched my major so late, so I could graduate in time. But I did it knowing that I'm doing something that I really wanted to focus my career on. When I graduated, the tech market bubble kind of crashed, and it was hard for me to find a job that I really wanted to do. So I took the first job I can get was in the private sector. It was in a corporate law firm, and I did that until I knew that I could sort of get on my feet and then find a job that I was passionate about. But I was sort of afraid to take that jump. When you're in such a comfortable position, when you're working in the corporate sector and private sector, and to take that position, it was really hard. But what really changed me, and this was like a life-changing event, was when my grandfather. He was living in rent-regulated housing in Sunnyside, and the landlord was trying to push him out. And the landlord was trying to push him out because if the apartment became empty, then it becomes unregulated, and they could rent it for 5 times the price. And so I didn't know how to handle that situation or how to help him, and so I got connected with a nonprofit organization called Asian Americans for Equality, and they provided all these services and helped my grandfather kind of protect his rent-regulated apartment. And so going through that, I saw the organizer come in and the pro bono attorney come in. I said, okay, this is what I wanted to do. So I went up to the organization. I said, oh, are you guys hiring anybody? And they said, yo, we're actually looking for a community organizer. And so I immediately quit my job because they said they'll hire me. And I started organizing. It was a completely new concept to me after working in a corporate legal office. But it was very satisfying because I was helping a lot of individuals. I was helping people who was going through the same thing that my grandfather went through. And so I was organizing, first off, in Flushing and Chinatown. And I say Chinatown, and you can imagine how difficult it is for a Korean American trying to organize in Chinatown when they're not speaking in English or Korean, and they're speaking multiple dialects of Mandarin and Cantonese. But we're able to organize a lot of tenants who are going through different kinds of housing issues. And then from there, I became public policy director for the organization, advocating for not just housing issues, but immigration issues, small business issues, city budget issues. The last campaign that I was working on was actually in Flushing, downtown Flushing, the large parking lot. They were converting that into a huge building. There's a huge building there now. But the merchants on Union Street, a lot of them were Korean American merchants, Union Street. They were afraid that they were going to be displaced. So I was organizing all those merchants. And at the end, when we got to negotiation, I got to know a person. His name is Council Member Leroy Comrie. So Leroy Comrie is chair of the Land Use Committee. And he's the person that controls essentially what gets built and not built through city council approval. And I got to know him really well. And one of the things he said to me was, I really like that you're community oriented. And I'm actually looking for a budget and legislative director. Do you want to join my team? And so I joined his team as a budget and legislative director in the city council. At the time, I was like the only, in fact, Asian American who was a staff member, a city council member's staff person at City Hall at 250 Broadway, where all the city council members had offices. But I was able to bring this perspective, a community perspective, into the process. I was with him for about 3 years, fighting for needs in different parts of the community and the borough. And when his term ended, Melinda Katz became the Queensboro president. When that happened, she came up to me and said, you know what, I'm actually looking for a budget director, somebody who's going to be able to understand the budget and figure out how we can respond as a borough and fight for our needs. And she appointed me as budget director. And I've been there for 7 years now, overseeing over $450 million in projects all across the city, all across the borough rather, including improvements to parks, to roadways, improving technology in every single school in Queens, for building new affordable housing, providing spaces for nonprofit senior centers and nonprofit community centers, and also understanding how the budget impacts our borough, like how much is actually coming into our borough to help our communities in need. For a long time, everyone sort of already knew that Queens didn't get its fair share, but nobody was able to ever put it into numbers. And so coming in as budget director, I broke down the budget. It's a 5,000-page accounting document, going by line to, put and determine that, Queens was indeed not getting its fair share. If you look at schools, our schools in the borough are on average getting about $1,500 less per student than the rest of the city. We have the highest overcrowding rate. The most overcrowded schools are in Queens. Francis Lewis High School was the most overcrowded school in the whole city at 200% capacity. That means that if there are 100 seats in the school, then there are 200 students. So it's twice as many students as there is room for in the school. Cardozo is right behind that, and Beyside High School is right behind that, and Jamaica High School is right behind that. So we had the most underfunded schools and the most overcrowded schools at the same time. When we look at senior services, Queens was receiving the least amount of services per senior in the entire city. When we look at youth programs, we had entire neighborhoods that had almost no youth programs from the city. We have entire council districts right now, like the one I'm running in, that doesn't even have a single beacon program. And so fighting for those things is what really kind of motivated me now to run for city council. Because as an organizer on the ground, I was able to really understand, the community side and how to bring that into government. And when I got to government, I was able to transform and bring community into government and that perspective. And now we're at a point where we are being impacted in a lot of different ways. And I'm hoping and knowing that my expertise will be able to help shepherd us out. We kind of look at what's going on in this COVID era, and we see, now there is sort of a light at the end of the tunnel when we think about the healthcare perspective. But when we think about the economic perspective, there's still a lot of work to be done. If you look at Hurricane Sandy, right, that was almost 10 years ago, we are still, right now, working on Hurricane Sandy issues in Queens. And this is a global pandemic. The city is going to see a reduced revenue of $5 billion, at least $5 billion projected, every year for the next 7 years, at least. And so how do we prioritize our communities? How do we figure out how to fund the most necessary components of making a community work, while at the same time balancing that with figuring out how we can either increase revenues or how we can better utilize our expenses. And individuals who are going to be able to really understand that I think will be the most useful in terms of like a city perspective in helping the city kind of come out of this pandemic. And that's what I want to do. My district, District 19, is one of the largest districts. Like I said, it goes from College Point all the way to Little Neck. And we have a lot of different people who live there, especially a lot of community. The Korean community is one of the largest in my district. And when we look at funding for our community centers and for Korean groups, we see that Asian American organizations aren't receiving the same amount of funding that we see occurring in other neighborhoods. And I want to fix that. When we look at mass transportation and senior transportation, we see that my district is a complete transit desert. We have very few bus lines, and they aren't accessible for a lot of people. We have a Long Island Railroad that's unaffordable to almost half the people in the district. And so I want to fix mass transportation issues, make buses and mass transportation more accessible, and provide senior transportation for people who need to go from their doctor's appointments and their homes. When we look at issues like quality of life issues, we want to make sure that we are maintaining a lot of those things, because those everyday things are the ones that really matter to a lot of people. Making sure that our roads are not crumbling, making sure we have basic infrastructure, maintaining things like public safety. These are like the little things that a lot of people really find important in the 19th district. And so I'm hoping to utilize my experience and my background, and especially my understanding of how the community is shaped, and having grown up in the community my entire life. I'm hoping to bring all those things together to really be an asset for my community. I currently live in North Flushing with my wife, who is a small business owner. She owns a small business, a play cafe. And I have 3 young children. I have an 8-year-old in 3rd grade who just took her first state exam. I have a kindergartner who he's a boy. He's my only boy, and he's the rambunctious one. And I have a youngest daughter. She's 1.5 years, almost turning 2 actually, who is now really starting to talk, has been stopped talking. And they're the ones that really shape my view on things. And I'm hoping that I will be able to bring these things and these views together as your city council member. Thank you so much.